The courtroom was unusually tense that morning. People shuffled into their seats with hushed murmurs, as if they sensed something was off. I was standing quietly near the rear aisle, observing everything. I wasn't in uniform, intentionally. Just a deep burgundy blazer over a cream turtleneck. Clean cut. Calm. Watching. A commotion broke out near the bench when a bailiff barked at an elderly woman who struggled to understand the courtroom instructions. She looked flustered. Her hearing aid kept slipping. I instinctively took a step forward, intending to help. But before I could speak, a sharp voice cut through the room like a knife. "Step back now," the officer snapped. I paused. Raised my hand slightly to show I wasn't a threat. "She's just confused," I said, calmly. "Let me help her to a seat." That's when it happened. The officer, a woman in her early 40s with a hard jaw and no patience, stormed over to me. "Who told you you could speak in here?" she yelled. Without warning, her hands were at my collar, pushing me back, gripping my neck with surprising strength. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped their phone. I saw flashes of horror on faces around me. But I didn't react. Not how she expected. I stayed still, my eyes locked with hers. "You need to let go of me," I said quietly. She didn't. Not yet. Because she didn't know who I was. Not yet. Her grip was still firm on my neck, but her eyes began to shift. She could feel it, the stillness in the room. The attention. The way even the judge froze mid-motion, gavel hovering in the air. "Do not resist." She barked, louder now, maybe trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "I'm not," I said again, voice calm, even. "But you are." From the side, a young deputy hesitated, watching everything unfold. His hand hovered near his radio, unsure if he should intervene, or stay far away. That's when I heard it. A voice near the bench, low but sharp. "Is she out of her mind?" It came from the court clerk. She'd been watching too. And apparently, she knew. The officer finally released her grip, but not because she wanted to. It was the room, dead silent, every eye locked on her. On me. She stepped back, breathing hard, trying to hold her authority like a shield. "You're out of line," I said firmly. She started to say something, maybe an excuse, maybe a threat, but then, behind me, the main doors opened. A tall man in uniform stepped in, carrying a leather binder. He looked straight at me, nodded once, and said the words that shattered the tension, "Chief Daniels, they're ready for your introduction." You could hear the officer's heartbeat stop. The courtroom didn't move. It was as if the entire building took one collective breath and held it. "Chief," the officer repeated under her breath. Her face turned pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. I straightened my blazer, brushed the wrinkles where her hands had been, and stepped forward slowly, past her, without a word. I didn't need to say anything. The weight of the truth was already sinking in around her like wet cement. As I approached the bench, the judge stood from his chair awkwardly, clearing his throat. "Apologies, Chief Daniels, we weren't expecting you until later this afternoon." I offered a short nod. Plans changed. Behind me, I could feel her watching. Burning with confusion. Regret. Embarrassment. All those things that catch up to you when you realize you made the worst kind of mistake. The courtroom bailiff leaned toward the officer and whispered urgently. Her lips parted slightly. She shook her head in disbelief, then looked back at me with wide, stunned eyes. But I didn't look back. I stepped up to the judge's bench, shook his hand firmly, and turned to face the room. "Good morning," I began. "As your new chief of police, I wanted my first public appearance to be here, where accountability begins." Now every face in that room looked different. Some were proud. Some ashamed. And one, absolutely speechless. The officer stood frozen near the gallery rail, her hands twitching at her sides. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to step forward, explain herself, maybe even apologize, but the weight of what just happened anchored her in place. I continued, my voice steady and clear. I came in plain clothes today for a reason. Not because I had something to prove, but because some of you already assumed I had nothing to offer. Silence. I let the words hang. No title. No badge. No uniform should be the reason we decide who deserves dignity. I looked directly at her then. Her eyes met mine for only a second before she lowered her gaze, jaw clenched tight. From the back of the courtroom, I saw a few people nodding, slow, deliberate, almost reverent. A man in a wheelchair. A young woman holding a toddler. Two public defenders who had seen this room chew people up for years. This department is changing, I said. Not because it wants to, but because it has to. And change doesn't come with speeches. It comes with actions. Then I turned back to the judge. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. The judge motioned for recess. The room stirred. But not the officer. She hadn't moved an inch. As I walked out, I passed close to her, close enough to hear her whisper, almost under her breath, I didn't know. I stopped just long enough to reply. You didn't care to. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Reporters had caught wind that someone important had been in the building, but no one had the full story, yet. I walked with the deputy who'd brought the binder, a younger officer named Reyes. His jaw was tight. He hadn't said much during the incident, but now he glanced over at me, hesitant. Chief. I recognized you when you stepped in. Just didn't think it was my place to say anything. I stopped and looked at him. Why? He hesitated. Didn't want to overstep. I nodded slowly. Sometimes silence does more damage than speaking up. That's part of what needs to change. He gave a slow, thoughtful nod. Yes, sir. We kept walking. Down the corridor, the head of internal affairs was already waiting in the conference room. They had pulled security footage, statements were being taken, and word was spreading fast. I wasn't here to fire anyone on my first day. But I wasn't here to protect bad habits either. Back in the courtroom, I knew that officer was probably sitting alone now, feeling everything crashing down at once. Her authority. Her confidence. Her assumptions. And I wouldn't shield her from it, not because of vengeance. But because that pain was the first step toward change. You can't lead a department without shaking it. And I planned to shake every corner. The conference room was cool and quiet, a sharp contrast to the storm that had just played out in the courtroom. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Waiting at the long table were two senior command staff members, the head of internal affairs, and a city liaison. All of them had read the alert by now. Some tried to hide their discomfort. Others didn't bother. Chief Daniels, the internal affairs officer, started, flipping open a thin folder. We've already begun preliminary documentation of the incident. I held up a hand. Don't sanitize it. Call it what it was, an unprovoked assault in a courtroom by someone wearing this department's badge. That shut the room up. The city liaison, a lean man in a gray suit, cleared his throat. Understood. Will the officer in question be placed on administrative leave? She already is, I said flatly. Effective immediately. There was a pause, then nods. No resistance. No pushback. She'll have the right to a hearing, someone murmured. She'll get one, I replied. And she'll face every second of it in the same courtroom where she tried to humiliate someone she thought didn't matter. I sat down at the head of the table. The silence was different now, respectful, maybe even a little wary. I looked each of them in the eye. This isn't about one bad decision. It's about what we've allowed to pass for standard behavior in plain sight. That ends today. They knew then, this wasn't going to be business as usual. And I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to lead. Later that afternoon, I walked the halls of the precinct. Not in a rush. Just watching. Listening. Faces stiffened when they saw me. Some officers gave quick nods. Others turned away too fast. A few looked me in the eye with something like respect, or maybe guilt. The whispers had already moved faster than the official memos. In one of the side offices, I passed by a group of junior officers watching body cam footage from earlier cases. I paused in the doorway. They quieted immediately. "You can keep watching," I said. One of them glanced nervously at the paused screen. A still frame showed an officer shoving a man too hard against a squad car. No one spoke. "I'll be reviewing these too," I continued. "Not to punish. To rebuild. We're going to talk about what's been normalized. Not just by policy, but by silence." Another officer, a woman in her early 30s, nodded slowly. "It's overdue," she said. I gave a short nod and moved on. When I reached the break room, the door was half open. Inside, sitting at the table alone, was Officer Granger, the woman from the courtroom. She looked up when she saw me. No arrogance now. No uniformed stance. Just someone who realized they had crossed a line they couldn't erase. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. She stood slowly. "Chief," she said. I can't take it back." "No," I replied, "you can't." A beat of silence. "But you can decide who you'll be after this." Her lip trembled. "I thought you were just, I know what you thought." She nodded once. Then sat back down, slowly. Shoulders slumped. "I'll see you at the hearing," I said before turning to leave. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort. And change never walks in quietly. 2 days later, the press conference was set. I stood at the podium beneath the city seal, with the mayor to my left and the district attorney to my right. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned in. Microphones bristled like thorns. "I know you've all seen the footage by now," I began. "So let me be clear, what happened in that courtroom was unacceptable. Not just for a citizen. But for any human being." Behind the lenses, notepads scratched furiously. Some leaned forward, expecting carefully crafted spin. But I wasn't there for theater. I didn't come here to protect a broken system. I came here to rebuild it. That means transparency. That means accountability, starting with our own. Someone called out from the press pool. "Chief Daniels, do you believe Officer Granger's actions reflect a larger problem in the department?" "Yes," I said without flinching. "And pretending otherwise is exactly how these problems survive." The room went still again. Another reporter, "And what message do you want to send officers watching this right now?" I looked straight into the cameras. That the badge is a responsibility, not a shield. And those who wear it must carry the weight of their choices. I stepped back. No applause. No dramatic music. Just the sound of truth echoing through a city ready for something real. That evening, I returned to the precinct. No cameras. No speeches. Just the raw weight of the job ahead. As I passed through the squad room, officers sat quietly at their desks. Some looked up as I walked by. A few gave nods, not forced ones this time. Real ones. The kind that meant they were thinking. I stopped at the bulletin board near the back wall. It was cluttered with shift schedules, announcements, and faded commendation photos. I removed one of the older posters, a recruitment flyer with smiling faces and staged poses. In its place, I pinned a new notice. Simple. Bold. Respect is not optional. Neither is accountability. Chief Daniels, no signature. No logo. Just the message. Behind me, someone spoke up softly. "Sir, thank you." I turned slightly. It was Reyes again, the young officer from the courtroom. He looked nervous but determined. "I've been here 3 years," he said. "You're the first person who's made me believe this job can actually mean something." I nodded. "Good. Now make it mean something for the next person who walks through our doors." He smiled faintly. Then turned and walked away, different than when I first met him. Shoulders straighter. Eyes sharper. Change doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with one moment. One mistake. And one decision to lead forward anyway. The courtroom was quiet again, just as it had been on that first day, but now, it felt different. I stood in the very spot where Officer Granger had grabbed me by the neck. Same worn floor tiles. Same bench. Same heavy air. Only this time, I wasn't unknown. And the silence wasn't suspicion, it was attention. The department had gathered for the swearing-in of several new recruits. Young faces, all in uniform, sitting upright and wide-eyed. I looked across them, not just for promise, but for responsibility. "You will be trusted with authority," I said to the room, "but that doesn't mean you'll be entitled to it." A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Power reveals who we are. And how you treat someone when you think they're beneath you, that's who you really are. In the back row, Officer Granger sat in plain clothes, awaiting the outcome of her disciplinary process. She didn't flinch. She didn't leave. She was listening, really listening. I didn't need revenge. I needed transformation. For this room. This department. This city. When the ceremony ended, I stepped outside and looked up at the precinct building. The same one that, for years, had buried stories like mine. But not anymore. This time, the truth stood at the front door. Wearing the badge. A week later, the disciplinary hearing was held. It wasn't public. No cameras. Just a long table, a few officials, and Officer Granger seated across from me, dressed in civilian clothes, her posture stiff but her eyes clearer than before. She didn't deny what happened. She didn't try to rewrite it. "I judged him," she said, voice low but firm. "Because of how he looked. Because I thought I knew what role he played. And I was wrong." There was a long pause in the room. The kind that feels heavier than any shouting ever could. She turned toward me. "Chief Daniels. I know I failed. But I want to stay. Not to cover it up. To fix it. To be better than who I was that day." The board deliberated quietly. Eventually, I was asked for my input. I stood, hands behind my back, and looked directly at her. "We don't grow by removing every person who stumbles. We grow by holding them accountable and demanding they rise. If she's willing to put in the work, real work, I believe she can serve this department. Not as who she was, but who she chooses to be now." There were no cheers. No applause. Just the hard, quiet truth of consequences, and the possibility of redemption. She was suspended. Reassigned. Required to complete extensive training. And monitored closely. But she remained. Because real justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to rebuild, brick by brick. Months passed. The department began to change, not overnight, not perfectly, but undeniably. Officers who once laughed off complaints now sat through community briefings, face to face with people they used to ignore. New recruits spoke differently, moved differently. They didn't carry fear in their posture, they carried purpose. And Officer Granger? She didn't disappear into the background. She showed up early. Volunteered for the hardest shifts. She listened more than she spoke. And though not everyone forgave her, some began to see something real in her transformation, effort. One day, during a community outreach event, I saw her crouched beside a young boy whose brother had been arrested weeks before. She handed him a water bottle and said gently, "If you ever want to talk to someone who's made mistakes, and is still learning, you come to me, okay?" He nodded. And I watched as she stood, glanced over at me, and gave the smallest, honest nod. That's when I knew, we weren't just cleaning up a department. We were building a new kind of legacy. One where authority meant service. Where every courtroom moment, no matter how painful, could be turned into something that echoed forward. Not in headlines, but in people. Nearly a year to the day after the courtroom incident, I stood once again in that very room, this time, not as a stranger or a symbol, but as a leader whose decisions had reshaped the foundation beneath our feet. There was a plaque now on the back wall. Small. Unassuming. It read, "Respect has no rank. Integrity wears no uniform." The courtroom was full, not because of a scandal, but because we were honoring the graduating class of new recruits. Among them were veterans, single parents, college students, and one young man who'd once been wrongly profiled, now wearing the badge with earned pride. I looked around and saw Granger seated quietly in the back, not in uniform, but invited. Not erased, but reclaimed. When I stepped to the podium, I paused for a long moment. Let the silence settle. "This job isn't about being right all the time," I said. "It's about what you do when you're wrong. How you answer that moment. How you rise from it." I looked at the new officers. You don't inherit trust. You build it, with every word, every decision, every time you walk into a room. A standing ovation followed, but I didn't smile for the applause. I smiled because the room felt different now. Not because I had demanded respect. But because together, we had earned it.